Friends, after watching episode 8, I think I figured out how the digital circus works. Not just details or assumptions that don't confirm anything, but something that completely explains the entire digital circus to us. Pomni was never really trapped, and no one in the circus has a real way to escape. If you want to know why, stick around because this theory is going to blow your mind. If you stop to think for just a second, there are too many things in the digital circus that just don't have a clear explanation. For example, the characters have been in there for who knows how long, and yet they don't need anything. And even worse, in all that time, no one has managed to get out. So, is it possible to escape from the circus or not? To answer this, we need to understand the following. Well, most people have assumed that all these characters are mentally trapped inside the circus. That is, somewhere in the real world, their bodies are connected to this system. And it makes sense. It seems to be the simplest explanation. Real people trapped in a virtual environment. But there's a big problem, and that's that there are details that don't fit with this theory. Really, the more you observe the digital circus, the more obvious it becomes that this doesn't work like just a person trapped in a virtual reality video game. Because if their bodies really existed in the real world, then they would need to eat, sleep, and stay alive somehow. But inside the circus, that just doesn't happen. They say it themselves.
Well, actually no, because we don't need to eat, drink, or sleep in this digital world. So the digital food here only gives the virtual sensation of eating without any of the nutritional benefits.
They don't need it. And that's pretty strange, because then how do they keep their physical bodies alive? But the creepiest detail is when they supposedly show us the real world. We see a computer, a VR headset, and an empty chair. So, if no one is sitting there, what really stayed inside the circus? Well, to understand what might be happening here, we need to take a look at a story that already did exactly this before. Soma. In Soma, we follow Simon Jarrett, a man who agrees to undergo a brain scan as part of an experimental treatment. Something that in theory shouldn't have any consequences, but after that process, he wakes up in a place that's much worse. But he can still think, feel, and exist, and that's when he discovers the truth. Because what exists in that place is a copy of his consciousness, a version of him that believes it's the original. And while that copy keeps living, thinking it can escape, the real Simon was never there. And this is where everything starts to take a much darker turn, because this is exactly what could be happening in the digital circus. They might not just be people trapped trying to get out. Rather, they're copies that believe they once belonged to a body. And when you start putting the pieces together, you realize that this isn't just a simple theory, it's a pattern. First, they don't need to eat. Second, how does Pomni get in? We know. We see that he put on a headset in an abandoned place, a space where there's clearly nothing to sustain life for hours, days, or however long his experience inside the circus lasts. So, with this, the idea that there's a body waiting outside no longer makes sense, because then, how would she still be alive? And third, the chair. That moment is key, because it's not just any detail. When we see the real world, there's the chair, but it's empty, there's no one there. It's connected. And I'm sure many people overlook this. But it could be a big clue. And finally, we have the behavior of the characters. The crises they have and that constant feeling of not really understanding who they are, not even remembering their past. And when you put all this together, you can draw some pretty intriguing conclusions. And here you come across a single explanation. The characters aren't trapped. They're just versions that never made it out. So nobody was transported to the circus. Their consciousnesses were simply copied. How? Right at the moment they put on the helmet. They didn't just play. Their consciousnesses were scanned and duplicated. And while that copy woke up inside the circus, it believed it was the original. And the real person simply left. They took off the virtual reality glasses and went back to their normal life. That's why the chair was empty. And well, my friends, this really makes sense and it's quite disturbing. Because if this is true, then the real them already left. The original person was never trapped, nor do they know that all of that happened. And if you stop to think about it, this goes way beyond horror. Because then, what are the characters really? If their memories aren't theirs, if someone else lived their past, it's just a borrowed identity. The crazy thing is that it seems like the characters can actually feel. But what if they discover the truth? What would happen then? Then it wouldn't matter whether they can get out or not. Because even if they found a way out, where would they go? There's no body waiting and nowhere to return to. Their fate would be to stay in the circus. And the most unsettling thing is that when you look at the characters with this in mind, everything starts to make sense. Kinger isn't crazy. Kinger knows something he doesn't want to share. There are moments when he's completely lucid, but it's as if he understands a truth that the others couldn't handle. And that's why he lives in that state. As if staying in the dark was the only way not to get abstracted. Jax isn't just sarcastic or chaotic. He seems like someone who's avoiding something, as if he knows there's something worse out there. Or as if the circus was a more bearable place than what he left behind. Then there's Gangle, who confuses us by the way he acts. Because if everything about the circus was simply fake, if they were just worthless copies, then why does Gangle suffer in such a real way? Why do his emotions feel so real? Well, my friends, because they are real. It doesn't matter if it's just a copy of consciousness. What he feels is still authentic. They're not just simple characters trapped. They are real consciousnesses trying to find meaning in their existence, in a place where maybe there was never an exit from the beginning. And now let's go with the question we mentioned earlier. What would happen if they discover the truth? Imagine for a second that Pomni manages to understand what's happening, that there is no body waiting for her, and that no one is looking for her outside. Imagine Kinger confirming what he always suspected. That's why he avoids thinking too much, because deep down he already knows the truth. Imagine Jax facing not only his past, but also understanding that he's not even the original one who made those mistakes. Would it even be worth escaping knowing all that? And that's where this theory stops being just a simple theory and could become something official. Maybe the problem was never finding the way out. Maybe they were never trapped. Well, my friends, this was the theory that could explain what's really happening in the digital circus. All the clues and details we saw seem to make a lot of sense. And that's why Kane tries at all costs to make them forget the idea of finding a way out. Now, I wonder the following. If they're just simple copies of real consciousnesses, were the abstracted characters simply erased? Tell me what you think about this theory, and if you have any other explanation. We'll be reading your comments.